I studied this stuff for 8 years, and when I speak on it, it's kind of, it's like people who go to Bible college and then drop out of church. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so just keep all that in mind. Like, the caveat is that I'm the black hat in the room about these issues.
Right.
But I am hopeful. And I do, long term, try to serve my community the best ways that I can. But that, these sort of like stepping stone ideas of launching your career on the national scene and in the media, it's like showbiz for ugly people, That's what I was taught in school. And when I heard that, I was like, that is so crass. Oh my God, how could you say that about what we're studying here? And I really was drinking the Kool-Aid at the time, and now...
Well, they talk about how Hollywood and politics have this love affair with each other because politicians crave celebrity, and celebrities crave power.
Yeah.
And how they just like envy each other.
Yeah, and it's a microcosm of the human condition. It's like I'm at a loss for what philosophical premise this is, but that people basically do what they're able to, or they get away with what they're able to get away with. And, it's like I was hearing people talk about John Bolton, this new nominee, is that he kisses up and punches down. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's boy, he's not the only one, I really hope that, people would want to expect more from our officials, but, that's, and people make mistakes by and large, but I've been in a lot of conversations lately of like, well, do you think that, people are primarily good or that people are primarily bad? And I think neither. I think people are complicated, and what sets them apart is only in retrospect. And maybe that's, formed by my studio practice, is that, all I can do is come in and make work, and the wake of work behind me will be judged, and I will be judged by that output. And I think that a similar idea can be put to people's deeds as human beings, right? Is that, people are complicated, and we like to make simplistic historical narratives about these, people of the past that makes it seem like they're simple to understand, but they're not. And it only takes a little bit of intuiting to figure that out. But what we stack up are our list of deeds, and sometimes it's complicated, and history can be rewritten. And I think that's also true about artworks, is like, I really, I think that Jackson Pollock is who he is because of Clement Greenberg, and because Clement Greenberg did a lot of writing about him, then it was easier for other art historians easy access to, writings about his work. And, we were talking about Mary Vernon and David Bates. I did a short stint at the Meadows Museum in the curatorial department there, and did some research on his work and some of his fellow students who have since passed away. And one of them, unfortunately, was a woman, and she had no interviews, not a lot written, no catalogs. And of course, then she was deceased. So finding information on her work was really, really hard. And I was trying to track down a David Bates painting, and even with all the information that's out there and that he's still living, it proved challenging. So, necessarily, like, these easy narratives, people are looking for their first best solution to write the memo for the collections committee or whatever. It comes down to what information you can find. So, but anyway, so. No,
it's okay. So you grow up in Frisco, then you drive down 380 to TWU.
Yes.
And, you study government there. and then grad school was. Where'd you get your Master's of Public Administration?
UNT. So also, I was the queen of Denton County for a while. So at UNT, and I was working in city development. So I was really interested in. It's funny that you say like mayors and policy influence. I was really interested in local development. I was working in urban planning and economic development at the time. And, doing everything from reviewing designs of signs in a historic district or architectural redesigns of these old buildings and, form-based development codes of, regulating. Sure. It's like you said about Frisco. It's like a lot of people don't think about the aesthetic planning that goes into a community until it's too late. Yeah. And then they've got blight and problems on their hands. Right. So that was kind of my life for quite a while, that I was in. It was interesting, but I did feel like my creative practice, I kept making work. I felt like my creative practice and the applied design part of the job was really, the life-giving part of that, not necessarily community planning or city council meetings. We'll put it that way.
It's funny. My mom had been a city secretary in a small Texas town for a bunch of years, and she was always sort of encouraging me. Even after I had my MBA, she's like, you should go back and look at getting your Master's of Public Administration. These city manager jobs. Yeah,
they're important jobs.
And so it never clicked with me. Yeah. I don't know.
Me neither.
But you so at some point there had to have been a catharsis.
Yeah. I through a series of events, I spent probably a lot of that time just blackout drunk. I was really, I'm just being honest. I was really unhappy and I wasn't sure why. Oh. And I was like, I wasn't married. I didn't have anything besides that job. And the job was just sort of like not quite hitting the nail on the head. And I wasn't like paying attention to what I knew about myself. I was paying attention to what other people were encouraging me to do. And I think that's part of why now I'm so diligent about guarding my headspace. Right. So I found myself in therapy because I was just like, sun's up, and I'm just not, I was still making work, but again, I was hoarding it all up. I wasn't showing anybody, and people were like, "You're really, you should do something with this. You should not just like store it all up and hide it." And and I was just sort of like, "Oh, thanks for the compliments, but not interested." Right. And so, I wound up in therapy, and the therapist that I had was really great, and I was like, if time, money, fear were no issue, what would you do? And, I was like, I honestly, I would finish out art school because I switched my major in undergrad. And, I feel like that's, what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm cramming it into these like odd hours, and I'm not engaging with anyone because I feel woefully uneducated, and I feel like I lack the rigor of instruction that actually finishing art school would have given me, and a lot of just continuing to make the work taught me the things about like materials and skills. And, I'd already been doing that my whole entire childhood and high school experience and early through college. Right. So a lot of the skills were there, but the conceptual development, the understanding, the critiques, the art history just wasn't there. And you have to learn it. So yeah, I was like really blunt, and just immediately came to me. I was like, I would go back to art school, and so it took some doing, and it took some, finagling financially and otherwise. And I was really, I had this like, my dad's from the Midwest, both ex-military parents. It was just sort of like, what are you doing with your life? I was like going in the wrong direction here. Right. I just had to sort of get some thick skin and some guts. And luckily I had worked, I've worked all my life. And so I was able to, without anybody's help, make it financially possible to go back to school, and, kind of freelance and do, some gig-based work and just kind of juggle, and get back, on track. And, it took several years to kind of just like stop the momentum from one direction and redirect the ship in another way. But I knew my head was in the right direction, and that if I could, learn some things, learn some skills, get my fundamentals kind of in place, that I could kind of be off and running with it. And, I had the idea of like, I could easily see, parlaying myself into like working for a museum or being an art teacher. Right. I don't know. Like, I know there's something on the other side of that will sustain me, but I don't know what it is just yet until I try some things. And so that just sort of necessitated, kind of removing the safety net a little bit and being willing to hustle.
There was probably a point there where, you probably thought, wow, is this a dream that could actually come true?
Yeah.
Right? And then there must have been a point where you're like, could it, your whole sensibility probably changed with the amount of hope of doing something that's really in tune with your identity instead of,
Or just like, I actually had a great success, like a taste of success in working. I worked for a couple of years for corporate communications at Dr. Pepper Sample Group in Plano. And I got to travel, and I made great money, and I had a little taste of working my ass off and having some success.
Right.
And it gave me a sense that this is possible for me. Whatever you do, you're going to have to work hard. So might as well give it a shot. There's either, you could be that person that's forever talking about moving to Paris or going to art school or whatever it is. There comes a point where you have to put up or shut up. Like, someday is going to be today. And, even if it's the small thing of researching whatever program you're interested in or whatever artist you want to study with, or, what do apartments rent for there? It's like, you have to take that step and just sort of, there comes a point where you take enough steps and you could just have to step off a ledge.
Right.
So there was that. And then, I was, like I said, I was making pretty good money. I was still single at the time, and I bought a ticket to Art Basel, and I went out in Miami, and I just saw all this craziness and all this, activity. And it's a very particular kind of scene there. It's an art fair, tons of money, just crazy money. Just
see and be seen.
Yeah, see and be seen. So much going on that I was just really like, there's all this opportunity. There's no excuse other than just giving up or settling for not just taking a chance on doing something with it. And so just seeing that critical mass of just stuff going on and people selling work and, people there working the booths even. It's like, I would do this if I could just be around art and artists all day long and then have enough money to make a little space for my own work.
Right. Right.
So it really comes to a point where, and I feel like I was lucky to be young enough to realize, but I think at whatever age and stage, it takes courage that if you've done something, else, to be able to say like, oh, I want to try something else, because we've become so specialized in our culture that it's really deviant to try to do that. You've got to decide at 18, you go to school for this, and then you get a job doing that. Right. And if you change your mind, you either, it just doesn't really happen that people step out and say, I don't want to do this anymore. Or if they do, actually, I disagree. I think there are a lot of people who do that. I just think those are the stories that people don't tell.
Right.
And so what you hear are the people that straight out of high school went to RISD, and then they went to Cal Arts, and then they struck at Famous or whatever, and we're talking about them obviously probably because they're making amazing work, but there are a lot of other different stories. I mentioned the story of Philip Glass, and there's tons of stories like that, but they're not necessarily the dominant narrative or the mythology around being an artist. So I think it's it's a good thing to kind of share that about my story, because it sometimes gets so tunnel vision